Welcome to ONNPoint. I'm Andy Martins. For this edition, we're live on TV and Facebook for October 15th. The election is winding down, less than a week away, and Sarah McCleary for the NDP is back live with me in the studio. We'll talk to Sarah right after these commercial messages. We're back with ONNPoint live on TV and Facebook on October 15th. I appreciate you joining us again for our continuing election coverage. And the big day is coming in this country on Monday. And one of the candidates for the NDP in Sault Ste. Marie, the only candidate for the NDP in Sault Ste. Marie, Sarah McCleary, joins me live in the studio. Sarah, thanks for coming back. And is this exciting or what?
It is. We're definitely gaining some momentum, and it's really, we're getting close.
Yeah, your leader is pretty down to earth. I was watching his news conference in Vancouver yesterday, and he protests with people, and is definitely in it for the people, which is good to see. You've gained a lot of momentum in the last 2 weeks. Are you seeing that on the ground in Sault Ste. Marie?
We really are. We're getting a lot of positive responses. A lot of people are, they're telling me whether it's me or Jugmeat, we're winning them over and, convincing them that, yeah, they absolutely want to go with the NDP this year. I think the fact that, Jugmeat has gone through a lot of the struggles that people here in the Sioux go through. He worked at a call center when he was younger, and I myself am, I've been really open about the fact that I'm going through all those same struggles, and I think that people are really appreciating that, and it's resonating with people. They want to go with somebody who understands their lives and their realities.
That's what I was wondering exactly when I heard him a couple of times. His message is very similar to yours, and it's clear that it's paying off on a national level. And we think that this may just work for you here in Sault Ste. Marie as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been represented for too long by, lawyers and, people who come from well-off families, and they don't understand what it's like for the average person in Sault Ste. Marie. And I think that people are frustrated with the fact that those people are funneling money up to the richest individuals and corporations. And it's time that, we are represented by people who understand our lives and want to help us.
What kind, are you hearing that at the door, the message that, hey, we're struggling, we're not getting ahead?
I am. Whether it's, I was speaking with a lady a couple days ago that, her medication costs just recently went up, or somebody yesterday that, telling me about how he's spending like 60% of his income on rent, and, it's all kinds of issues here in the Sioux, and people are struggling, and they want the help. They want people who want to actually do something for them.
And that's, you can identify with that because your husband is going through the same challenges with his cost of medication.
Exactly. We lost our benefits recently when my husband changed his job, and he went 3 months without one of his diabetes medications because we just couldn't fit it into the budget because those medications are really expensive.
Right.
And we're not alone. I've heard that from a lot of people at the doors, and there are a lot of people going through that. One lady, the lady that I mentioned, she started crying when I was talking to her, and that's not right. People shouldn't be going through that. Not in Canada.
No. I mean, we're not a third world country for sure. What other people are kind of telling you they're going to vote? Like when you ask them, can I count on your vote? Or are they kind of holding back?
A lot of people are definitely giving their support. There are some people that still, they haven't really had time to look through the platforms. And so I talk to them, and they really like what they hear. So they quite often will say, well, you know what? Probably, but let me look into it a bit more, which is fair. But yeah, no, we're getting a lot of people saying, you know what, I watched Jugmeat in the debates and he's doing amazing. I would love for him to win. And, people who've watched me and spoken to me, and they really appreciate that I'm being honest with my own, what I go through. So we're definitely getting a lot of positive responses at the doors.
Exactly. I mean, I've been following politics for a long time, and I've seen your leader as probably engaged and in flight now, just to the almost the level that Jack Layton was. And that's pretty good. That's darn good.
It is. I mean, Jack Layton saw the orange wave, and I think that something similar is going to be happening here.
Now, if you were to end up with a minority, if we were to end up, a pretty good chance that it's going to be a minority, and you had the balance of power, what would your conditions be to supporting the Liberals? Because we know that your leader said he will not support the Conservatives.
Exactly. We're a little bit too far apart ideologically to go with the Conservatives, but in terms of any other party, if they're willing to commit to aiming for our priorities like introducing universal pharmacare, actually acting on reconciliation, not just making promises, making affordable housing more available, and acting on climate change quickly, those are some of the things that if the other parties are willing to commit to those, then we'll work with them, absolutely.
Well, this is the thing that struck me more than anything, that your leader will act on things. He won't pull back like the other two leaders say he's going to do something and then pull back on it.
Exactly. I think the problem is the other two parties, they're very beholden to rich corporations, and so they're going to make promises during the campaign that we're going to do this, but if it doesn't benefit those corporations, and they change their mind once they get into power because they don't want to lose those corporations' support. They back their campaigns and they don't want to upset their rich friends, so they'll make these promises during the campaign, but then when it comes down to it, they don't want to upset their rich friends, and they bail.
Exactly. How does the NDP, I haven't had a chance to completely look at the platform, but we remember 4 years ago, Harper, 5 years ago, Harper moved the retirement age up to 67, and then our current Prime Minister moved it back. Where does the NDP feel that the retirement age should be at this point?
We have no current plans to change it. We want to support our seniors and make sure that they can retire when they want and comfortably. So really our biggest commitment to seniors and retirement is making sure that the CPP is an actual livable wage. I've heard from a lot of families, including my parents even, who are struggling to get by on their pensions. And again, that's not right here in Canada. People who have worked for their whole lives should be able to retire in comfort and not be scraping and not even have enough money. One man told me he didn't even have enough money for a pair of socks after he paid his rent because his CPP isn't enough. He has 2 pairs of socks that he's been darning. And again, that's not right. So we want to make sure that Canadians can retire in comfort and, with dignity.
Right. Have you been pushing the fact that if the NDP does hold the balance of power, your vote, and if you're elected in Ottawa, will mean a lot more than people think it will?
Absolutely. I mean, some of the best things about Canada have come about because the NDP held the balance of power. Things like, Medicare and the CPP. These came about because the NDP held the balance of power and pushed the government to making these changes and implementing these programs. So it's definitely something that people are keeping in mind, and it's resonating with them for sure.
And we're seeing that as well. We've had a year of Doug Ford in Ontario, and minority governments are probably healthier. And I've said that on this show, that majority governments give the party in power a blank check quite often. So in other words, if you are again in the coalition with the Liberals, would you push them on electoral reform this time in a minority situation?
We absolutely would. It's very important. 80% of Canadians want electoral reform. And, Justin Trudeau came to power last election on a promise of implementing it. He promised us that would be our last election with first past the post, and here we are having another one. So we would absolutely be making sure that is happening for the next election, and that, all Canadians' votes count and make a difference, because we know that right now a lot of the votes that people cast, they don't go towards anything. And like you say, 30% of people shouldn't give a party 100% of power.
For our viewers, if you want to outline, Sarah, briefly why electoral reform, why we need to change what we have now.
Well, right now with first past the post, I mean, look at what happened in Ontario. Doug Ford got 39% of the vote, and that's not even everybody in Ontario voting. So 39% of the people who voted for Doug Ford, but he got 100% of the power. So the Conservatives are basically they have carte blanche, and so with proportional representation, it's a lot more balanced, and each individual region has its own representatives that actually have a solid voice at the table, and every vote matters with proportional representation.
And that's the key. And like you said, the Prime Minister promised it in 2015 and he pulled back. Now, a minority situation may change that.
Exactly, and that's definitely the goal. We want to make sure that we hold him accountable, whoever the Prime Minister may be, that we hold them accountable, and push through important things that Canadians want, like proportional representation.
What are the negatives? Are you hearing some negatives at the door that you were surprised that you would hear about?
Not really. I mean, the biggest negative that I wasn't surprised about is, people are disillusioned and they're not sure if they're going to vote. But I wasn't surprised about that, really, because we know that, like I said, Trudeau came to power 4 years ago with a lot of promises that he then broke. And I think people are very upset about that, and they don't know who they can trust now.
Exactly. Sarah, stay right there. We'll take a couple of commercial breaks, and we'll be right back after these commercials. Welcome back to On Point. I'm Andy Martins. We're live on TV on October 15th and Facebook as well. And we're back with Sarah McCleary, the NDP candidate for Sault Ste. Marie. Welcome back to the show, Sarah. This last week's probably going to be the most exciting yet, where you feel the momentum. I wanted to ask you something that you were on last time you were on Point. You said you wanted to attract the millennials, the young people, to your campaign and to vote for you. How is that going?
The youth vote is absolutely drawn to the NDP. Those who go out to vote, definitely, our message resonates with them. They know that we want to help with, reducing student debt and making it easier for them to buy a house or rent a house, and start a family with making childcare more available. So, we're absolutely getting a lot of support from that demographic. We just need to make sure that they actually go out to vote, because, a lot of them, again, are pretty disillusioned as well. So those that are willing to go out to vote and ready to do that, we've had a lot of volunteers on our team, actually, that are, millennials and part of that youth. And I think that it's growing for sure.
Are you kind of surprised at the disillusionment of some of the young people? Are they kind of thinking that nothing's going to change, or?
I think that that's what a lot of them do think until they hear Jagmeet speak, or I've had a lot of conversations with people that have said, youth who say, I don't know why I should bother, and then I talk to them and I explain what we want to do for them, and they go, you know what, yeah, that sounds great. So as long as we get out and speak with them, I think that they're ready to go and they'll be happy to support us. It's just a matter of making sure that they recognize that they actually do have a voice and their voice is important.
Exactly. Let's talk about debt in Canada. Do you think people are making too much of the fact that, yes, our current Prime Minister maybe pushed up the debt in the last 4 years more than he should have, but I think we're still one of the lowest in the G7 countries in terms of debt level. What's your feeling on that?
We are still one of the lowest in terms of debt to GDP, like you say, and I think that it is important that we balance our finances responsibly. And I think that what it really comes down to is that Trudeau, he has spent, but he hasn't stopped spending with fossil fuel subsidies. $3.3 billion are still going towards fossil fuel subsidies, and they're still giving billions to corporations who don't need it. And so if we stop that, then I think that our financial situation would be much stronger, and we'd be able to provide support to the people who actually need it.
Right, right. He's kind of putting some of these monies in the wrong areas.
Exactly.
Um, let's talk about climate change. I'm just mentioning that on my way in to the show today about how much rain we're getting. I'm just wondering the amount of snow in the Alberta and Manitoba. How does the NDP feel about climate change?
We know that it's happening. You know, the scientists are in agreement that climate change is happening, that we need to act quickly. And so that's part of our commitments, is to act quickly and use scientific data and goals to drive our actions. But we want to make sure that we're acting in a way that is responsible and that we're taking care of workers, making sure that in the shift away from fossil fuels, nobody's losing their job, and we're supporting those who do need to change jobs. And you know, we have to make sure that we act quickly and like we want to win, but we also have to make sure that we're taking care of people. We can't forget about that part of it.
That's the key, isn't it, with your the NDP? And I heard it loud and clear from your leader yesterday. It's all about people.
Exactly, and I think that's what it needs to be. I mean, for too long, the government has been about corporations and been about you know, helping the people up here, and we need to make sure that we're helping the average person. Every Canadian, we need to make sure, is benefiting from the government's programs and services.
Right. If you're elected on October 21st, what would be your first priority as MP elect?
I think that the first thing that I would want to do is make sure that we are acting on climate change. I think that that's one of the first things that we need to do, because you know, we know, number one, that it's happening and we need to act quickly, but we also know that you know, here in the Soo, we're feeling the effects. We're getting that rain. People's basements are getting flooded. You know, the boardwalk, the water was coming up over the boardwalk. We don't need to have, you know, downtown flooding, and we don't need people's insurance rates going up because their basements are flooding. And we need to make sure that you know, those actions are being taken so that people aren't taking the hit, you know, themselves financially, even on top of all of the other reasons to take care of climate change.
Exactly. I've been here almost 30 years, and I've never seen this kind of rain. And every time we're expecting rain, I feel like running and hiding under my bed. I mean, it is getting a monumental amount of rain, and things seem to be changing, and sooner or later, people are going to get it that climate change is real.
Exactly.
The NDP released their physical plan. How does your plan differ from the other parties?
Ours is really, like I've said, it's focused on helping everyday people. It's focused on making life more affordable for everyday people. So, you know, introducing universal pharmacare, we're the only ones who want to make sure that everybody gets the same access to medications. You know, we want to make life more, make more affordable housing available, and you know, reduce student debt burdens. So ours is really focused on the everyday people and actual ways of helping them, not just tax cuts that then have to be paid for by cuts to services. And you know, we want to actually make sure that we are giving people the supports that they need without having to cut services.
Exactly, and that's the key. Really differentiates you from the other parties.
Exactly, yeah. We care about everybody, right? We don't only care about the rich corporations and the 1%. We actually want to help every single Canadian.
Let's focus on Northern Ontario now. You guys have a pretty good plan for Northern Ontario, where the other parties really don't talk about it.
Exactly. We're the only party that's released a Northern Ontario platform. We recognize that Northern Ontario has really been left behind by the last several governments, and you know, our services are often the first to be cut, and then we're just forgotten, and we don't see the services and the resources coming here. So we've actually put out a Northern Ontario platform to make sure that the federal government is committed to supporting Northern Ontario, you know, to making sure that rail is coming back to Northern Ontario, and you know, making sure that we're getting the services that we need, and things like rural Canada Post in rural communities. We want to make sure that those services are there.
Exactly. This area got a bum deal on this here on Central Railway. No funding from Doug Ford, no funding from the federal government. What's the NDP position on how they would rectify this problem, key problem for Northern Ontario and Sault Ste. Marie?
It is. It's a very important issue here. I mean, we know in the Sioux we've got Algoma and we've got Domtar and Ecom that will be affected if the rail stops running. So we want to make sure the NDP is committed to making sure that that stays running. Mike Mantha at the provincial level and Carol Hughes, the MP for Algoma Manitoulin, they've been working really hard on this file for quite a while, and we want to make sure that we're supporting those businesses and making sure nobody's losing their jobs. And at the same time, we know that if that rail stops running, we're going to have 20 to 30,000 more trucks on the roads every year in this area, and that will take a huge toll on our roads and
Right.
Added cost for maintenance for that. So we want to make sure that we're supporting this and making sure nobody's losing their jobs.
And of course, it's the safety factor for the everyday person as well.
Exactly. The more trucks there are on the road, the less safe it is for the average family driving, with their kids to Toronto or whatever it may be. So, absolutely, we need to make sure that the rail continues to run.
The NDP has also been a huge defender of the steel industry. What would you be different? What would you be doing for the steel industry if you're elected on October 21st?
We would absolutely, like you say, we've been a huge supporter of the steel industry for a very long time. We're committed to making sure that any Canadian infrastructure projects use Canadian steel first. And we're also committed to helping support those workers. So we're going to make sure that their pensions are safe, and we're going to make sure that they're at the front of the line when a business goes into CCAA proceedings.
Great. Sarah, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming in. And if you want more information, Sarah's campaign office is on Queen Street. What's the address, Sarah?
24 Queen Street East, right across from Ernie's.
Right. You got it. And stop in and see Sarah. She'll be glad to answer any of your questions. And I'll be back to wrap up the show right after these messages. Welcome back to On Point. I'm Andy Martins. We've been live on TV and Facebook, and hope you've enjoyed the coverage today with Sarah McCleary. Next edition of On Point will be Election Day in Canada. We will have Katie Blunt, Executive Director of Habitat, and Geo McLean, the Green Party candidate. Then I'll be thrilled to join On TV's election coverage, the second half, after Luann and Tim on Monday night. And then Tuesdays On Point will be Amy Sacato talking about the election results and all of that. So have yourself a great day. I'm Andy Martins for On Point. We'll see you next time.